Welcome, everybody, to our Christian Fiction Fans Book Club. Our selection this month is He Should Have Told the Bees by Amanda Cox, and we're super excited to have Amanda joining us tonight. I'm going to read you her official bio that I pulled off of her website. Um, it says, before becoming a stay-at-home parent, Amanda spent her time counseling children, families, and individuals through life's challenging moments. And I can see where having a background as a counselor comes through in this work of people dealing with trauma, and you definitely know what you're talking about. Now she uses those same skills to develop layered characters and stories, bringing them on a journey of hope and healing, a journey she hopes her readers experience in their own lives as they read. Amanda is the Christie Award-winning author of The Edge of Belonging, The Secret Keepers of Old Depot Grocery, and He Should Have Told the Bees. She holds a bachelor's degree in Bible and theology and a master's degree in professional counseling, but her first love is communicating through story. So, welcome, Amanda.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I love getting to chat with readers and spend time that way.
Perfect. Well, we're super glad you're here. And so I'm going to start with a few questions, but for those of you who don't know, who are new here, we try very hard not to spoil it. So if you have only read part of the book, that's okay. We're not going to tell you what the ending is, so you can still finish it up this week. And if you have questions for Amanda as we go along, you can always raise your hand, unmute yourself, or type them in the chat. So first, Amanda, I would love to hear about your journey to becoming an author. How did that all start? Did you always want to be an author or?
So I was always an avid reader. Um, as a kid, I was reading everything I could get my hands on, and library day at school was the best day of the week for me because I got to hang out with all the books and read. And I was constantly like the librarian was always trying to find something else for me to read because I would read everything. Um, I didn't necessarily ever see myself as a published author. Although I did when I was small, write my first story and illustrate it when I was like 7, 8, 9. In that age range, I worked on this story, and my parents, being the incredibly supportive people they are, they tried to get that book published for me, and I still have like the written, very nice rejection letter that I got from
Oh,
the publisher for my book. So I got my very first publishing rejection when I think I was in third grade, I think.
that's amazing.
So it was, yeah, pretty funny. And so that was just something that was kind of like in the back of my mind, I guess, but it wasn't something I was actively pursuing, but I was always pursuing stories. Um, and I went on to get my degree in counseling, worked in youth ministry, worked in counseling, things like that. And then when my second child was about to be born, just because of the pacing and the scheduling, I just was just feeling how fleeting those very early years were. And I was going to either have to kind of be stuck where I was with my career and not continue to move forward with different licensure requirements and things like that with the state, or I was going to have to be working more than full time. And we were able for me to stay home. So that's what I decided to do. And um, you know, taking care of small children is very taxing, but it's taxing in a different way than being in the workplace and sitting down with counseling clients and things like that. And so I sort of started writing as an experiment to see if I could do it. It was a way for me to kind of unwind at the end of the day. It was a creative outlet for me. It exercised a part of my brain that wasn't really getting used in the same way because I was working with characters in the same way I might be examining a situation that a counseling client might have. So it sort of started out as an experiment to see if I could possibly do this thing. And then once I wrote it, um, found some different critique partners to read it and things like that. Um, because I wasn't really sure. Like, I'm okay, I wrote a story, but I don't really know if it's like if anybody else wants to read it.
Right,
If
yeah.
like, is this just like something that I did for me and it was fun and it was great. And so I had like different affirmation, like, hey, you have a gift for this. And I'm the type of person, I don't necessarily love the spotlight to be out in front of people. So my natural tendency is to would have been to take it and stick it in a drawer, and just okay, writing it was enough. The joy of writing it was enough. But I feel that if God gives us gifts, we should see um, how he would like to use those gifts. And I didn't want to be the thing that was putting a limitation on how he wanted to use my gifts. So I started learning about publishing, submitted books, got rejections, things like that. Did a lot of the usual things like the query letters where send things out to an agent, editors, got a lot of no's. Those no's got progressively nicer as time went on. I'm trying to figure out because it's a different realm, like publishing, like learning what publishers are looking for as opposed to, oh, I just wrote a story, I really like it. But, or even readers, like talking to readers and talking to a publisher, it's just a different world. And so I was learning a lot about how to do that. And I joked with a friend, let these rejections get any nicer, they'll be yeses, but a lot of them, they would be very complimentary, but then they would end with, but no, not the right timing, not the right book, not sure what to do with it. And so I ended up meeting my editor at the publishing house that I have now, my acquisitions editor, in a really roundabout way that is not the normal way that people get publishers. But I had the book that ended up being my debut novel, The Edge of Belonging. I had submitted it for a while. I was still getting no's, like I said, very nice no's. But I was like, I still believe in this book. I believe in it so much, but it might not be the right timing for the book. Maybe it's a timing issue. So I was going to put it aside, do it. Writers do it and write. Um, and so a Twitter pitch party came up, and what that is you in a tweet, 120 characters, um, you say what your book is about, and you put a hashtag, and editors and agents would search that hashtag, and decide if they wanted to hear more. And so I did it on a whim, honestly, because I was just like, you know what, this book is done, it's polished, it's ready to go. Why not? And that's how I ended up meeting the acquisitions editor at Revell, and that's how the whole process of my first book being published started was through Twitter, and I don't even like Twitter.
That's awesome. What a great story. Yeah, it's kind of like, what do you have to lose? You might as well
Right?
put a tweet
Might as well
out
try
and
it.
and it turned out for you. That's so cool.
Mm.
So, how many books have you written so far? And where does He Should Have Told the Bees fall in the line of your books?
So I have four that are published, and He Should Have Told the Bees is my third.
Okay,
Then I've got a couple more that are in the works for the future, but
nice. Yeah, do you have any more under contract?
I have two more under contract that aren't out right now. One's kind of getting ready to start the editorial process, and one is a brand new baby draft that I'm just now starting. So,
Love it. Love it. So cool. So your books have also been finalists and won a number of awards. Can you tell us a little bit about the awards, like what the significance is of them and kind of what the process was for getting those awards?
so my debut novel, The Edge of Belonging, it won a Christie Award for first novel, and it also ended up winning Book of the Year. That is something
That's
that my publisher
amazing.
nominates. Yeah, it was
Congratulations.
thank you so much. It was just such a shock. It probably, especially that debut novel, because of the fact that you spend so much time writing that book, wondering if anybody's ever going to read it in the first place, much less enjoy it on any level. But for it to receive that type of recognition was really an honor. And it's a really well respected award in Christian fiction. And so that was a huge honor to receive that award. And then um, I received that award. It was in 2020, so it was all virtual, all of the things. And I had gone to the Christie Awards in the past. I love just going and celebrating with authors because so much of writing is you're kind of behind your desk, you're
Yeah.
alone, but it's fun to gather with other authors and celebrate their work. So it was kind of sad that I didn't get to be there for that. But the next year, I was able to be the keynote speaker at the Christie's the following year. And then
Oh,
my book, Secret Keepers of Old Depot Grocery, was a finalist as well. And again, I am not the person who likes to be out front and on a stage. But that evening at the awards, did my keynote address, and then my The Secret Keepers of Old Tebow Croce ended up winning um, general fiction and then won book of the year again. And so I spent a lot of time on that stage that night. And I had spent so much time prepping for my keynote because, like I said, public speaking is a huge fear of mine, but I try to be obedient if I've been given opportunities to share my voice, whether it's in written form or spoken word. So my publisher liked to tease me. She's like, you had quite a night up there in front of everyone. But again, it was a huge honor. And I don't know, like I said, the recognition is it's not everything. Just because a book hasn't received an award doesn't mean that's any less quality than a book that hasn't. You know, you have a
Right.
panel of judges and all of those things. But it is also nice to get those affirming moments because as a writer, you spend a lot of time alone and you're wondering, okay, when this book goes out into the world and people read it, what will they gain from it? What will they receive? Will they
Yeah.
enjoy that book?
Yeah. Now, did He Should Have Told the Bees? Has it been nominated or won something also?
It was a finalist in the Carol Awards, which is an awards, and they just had the awards for that. So didn't win a Carol Award, but I was super happy just
But
to
it
be
was
a
a
finalist.
finalist. It was a
As a
finalist.
finalist, I'm like super thrilled, and it's all. And I just found out that it's a finalist in the Christie Awards again this year. So I'm really excited to. I get to be there. I get to participate in a conference that they have before the Christie's during the day, and then a reader event the next day. So it's going to be a really great weekend of just celebrating good Christian fiction.
Yeah. So tell us the difference between Carol Award and Christie Award for people who aren't familiar.
So they're both awards that celebrate excellence in Christian fiction. Um, the Carol Awards are put on by American Christian Fiction Writers, ACFW, and it's a part of it's an organization that I'm really thankful for. It's kind of this place where, excuse me, I they put on a national conference every year, and so as a part of that, you can submit your books, and so they are broken down to different categories, similarly to the Christie Awards. And so, yeah, it's just but that's something that I, as an author, do Christie Awards, publishers, and things like that. So I can't submit, if I was independently published, I would submit my own book, but it's something that publishers, because you are the publisher, but
Yeah.
publishers are the ones that nominate and things like that.
Yeah. So good. Well, congratulations. Those are
Thank you.
amazing. Like, you should be really proud of that. So let's get to He Should Have Told the Bees. Tell us, where did this story idea come from and what was the process to write it?
So it was my third book, and it sort of started as a little bit of a joke with my social media followers and things like that, because it was the year 2020, and I was working on the last edits of Secret Keepers of Old Depot Grocery. I keep bees for a hobby, so I have a love for bees. And I was sitting there going through Galley, and Galley pages are those beautiful formatted pages that look as close as to what your novel looks like before it goes to print. So the design pages are there, the formatting is there, and so you, as an author, you read through that one more time in order to try to catch as best you can any last minute things that might have gotten messed up in formatting or last minute edits. And I was sitting there, and one of my bees from my hive landed on the title screen, and so it looks. And I made a joke on social media that she was inspecting the novel. She found it to be satisfactory, but would prefer it if bees played a starring role. And then it just kind of got me to thinking. I'm like, ooh, I really could write a book where bees play a starring role. I write women's fiction, and so it deals with a lot of issues in a woman's life, whether it's family, life issues, processing trauma, all of those sorts of things. And when you think about a beehive, the primary functions of the hive are all performed by the female bees. And so I had the female bees in the hive, and then I had the drama going on within the story. And so it's kind of something that sort of interplayed together. I was kind of figuring out who these two women were and what their lives were about. So it started really with Beck, her character, because I knew I wanted to write a beekeeper.
Mm-hmm. And how did you get this idea for the trust or the will being left with this secret person all of a sudden named that Beck had no idea who this was and why she was there?
I really wanted to explore a character when thinking about Beck's father, who we like, because I feel like it's something that a lot of us can relate to, in which we have a certain amount of knowledge and information about them, but then something happens, and there are things that become uncovered in which you realize that person, there was a lot more to that person's story than what they told you. And so she has this process in which she's trying to grieve a father in which she dearly loved, but then also process the fact that there were things that he didn't tell her, and there are things that she's going to continue to have to work through. And so I wanted to explore that idea with the character because I feel like in the world that we live in today, a lot of times we take people and we're like, all good, all bad.
Right.
And so I wanted to take a character in which Beck had to process her feelings about who her father was and his plans for her and her plans for her farm because she really had him on a pedestal as this dad who always took care of her and always protected her. And then at his untimely death, she's left vulnerable and she's having to process all of those things.
Yeah, it was such a cool concept. I loved the mystery all the way through, just going, wait a minute, picking up on these little clues like the flower and that you're like, okay, wait, something's going on here. And so it was super fun. So tell us more about your beekeeping activities. How long have you been a beekeeper and like I don't how many bees do you have? What do you do with your honey? Or
So I'm definitely not a professional like Beck is, who's been doing it her entire life. I've been keeping bees. I'm trying to think how long now. I had gotten into it a couple years before Bees came out, the book. I'd always just been kind of fascinated with them. They just the society, the way that they work, the intricacy of like what goes on in a hive and how every bee has a job and all of these things. So I had been really fascinated with that idea. And so I started talking to my daughter about it. And we decided we're going to take the leap and we're going to do this beekeeping thing, and which was a little bit scary to do because there's a big difference between like reading about bees on the internet and then taking a box that has about 30,000 bees in it and dumping it into a brand new hive.
oh my gosh.
So it, it's always a learning experience. And so I have a couple of hives that I keep. And so just, honey for myself mostly. A lot of it is learning. I'm still learning. Years have been a little better than others as far as how much honey we get, but
And so this is
yeah.
something you and your daughter do together?
Mhm.
And how old is your daughter?
She is 11.
Okay.
Um, And so she does it with me. And then my younger son, who's 9, he will help me. My oldest son is like, I am no, thank you. No interest at all. Please keep me away from your beehives. Do we really need to have bees, Mom?
Yeah, yeah. So you brought for us a little activity about bees. Would you like to share your screen and lead us through
I
this?
will attempt to share my screen. I have never actually done this.
Okay,
So,
there's a green arrow on the bottom that says share.
okay.
If you
And
click on
then
that, it will bring up
like
another,
a window that I have
yeah,
open.
yep.
Okay.
And you can just push like share screen or something like
Okay.
that.
See. Do that. Now it's saying open system settings. Hold on. Just like, hold on now.
Gonna make it
Think
complicated.
maybe that'll do it. Oh, well, acting like it'll let me do it. But I don't know what it is.
So
All right,
if
let me
you,
try again.
yeah, if you click on that
Okay, I think it'll
button,
do it now.
okay.
Okay. Is it showing up for you all yet?
Mm,
Oh, I have to hit share. Thank you for bearing with
there
me.
we go.
All
That's
right.
it.
Okay. So this is Can You Spot the Queen Bee? And I don't know how we'll determine who sees the bee first, but we can try to figure it out. Okay, so the little picture at the top right here, we have our queen bee, and her body is a lot different than the other workers in the hive. She has this shiny bald spot, and then she has much longer legs, which you can't really see. She has no black stripes, and like her abdomen or whatever part of her body, I'm not a, I keep bees, but I'm like, wait, what is the anatomy parts of the bee called? I don't know. Okay, so here is the first one. When I scroll, is it scrolling for you all?
Yes. Yep.
Okay,
Perfect.
because I can't see what I'm doing on my end, so I'm just trying to make sure that I'm not talking and it's not making sense. Okay, so in this first picture, can you see her? Everybody see her? She's right there. Sometimes they will gather around her in like a little circle. All the worker bees, their whole life is just to make sure she's fed, cared for, and they feed and care for the eggs that she lays to become the future generations of bees. All right, here goes the next one. All right, can you guys see her in this one? Frame's a little bit bigger and it's a little more crowded.
I think I see her.
All right, you think you see her? You think
Yeah.
you see her? All right, should I reveal it?
Yes,
All right,
reveal it. Tell us.
she is right here.
Ooh, I got it right.
You can see them. They will follow her. Sometimes it's so when you are looking for her in the hive, all of these bees are in motion. They're not still. And so it takes some practice to find her. As a beekeeper, you want to find her. The reasons you want to see is if you don't have a queen that is healthy and laying, your hive's going to die because she's the one who keeps all the future generations going. So it's really important to be able to find her and know signs that she is in there and well. But it takes a little bit of practice because all of those bees are moving. Okay, here comes the next one.
Okay.
All right, this one's a little tricky. And as the population of the hive gets more full, because as the season goes on, it gets harder and harder to find her.
Ooh.
Oh, you found her. Oh, that's cool. You can make a little circle on there. All these new tricks I'm learning. Yeah, she's right there. And then, can you find her on this one?
That's a lot of bees.
Yeah, yeah, it gets at the end. Yeah, when they're all moving and all those stripes are blending in
Oh, I
together,
can't
and
even imagine.
I, it's yeah. Sometimes I can find her, sometimes I cannot. I will look for other signs. If I can't spot her, I will look for other signs that she's doing well. All right. Do you guys find her? Should I show you where she is?
Yeah, show me. I think I know.
Okay, she's right
Oh, I got it.
there.
Good job. Good job.
Oh yeah, this is my little answer key if you can find her.
Okay, cool. Yay, you learned how to share on the
I learned
screen
how to
too.
share screen. I have accomplished something. If I don't know if you all are having a good time tonight, but I have learned something new. So
New skills. We love it. Well, that was awesome. Thank you for sharing your bees with us. And I don't think I could do it when they were all moving, but I can
sometimes I'm
still
just like,
picture.
okay, I give up.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So, one of the things I like to ask authors is often there is a kernel of truth in even a fictional story. Are there parts of this story or characters that were inspired by a real life event or a real person that you could share?
For me and my stories, sometimes it's like bits and pieces from all different places. So sometimes it's a little bit hard to pinpoint, oh, that was definitely this event or that event. My character Fern is lightly inspired by my daughter, because she is this character who I call her a character because when she was little and she would come out of her room, she would just it was like she was a different little character every time. And I'm like, okay, which one's your real personality today? Because she was such a character, but at the same time, she was kind of like this old soul. But then could be really wacky and funny and mischievous. She's still that way. So Fern is roughly the same age as my daughter Ellie, and so I would kind of think I will be like, okay, I don't know if all little kids would do this, if it's accurate to all little kids, but is it accurate to Ellie? And so we kind of use her as like a gauge. Like, is this something that Ellie might do, in different circumstances in her life?
I love that when you're telling me that that you do your beekeeping with your daughter and how old she was. That's immediately what I was thinking of. I'm like, oh, that sounds like Fern.
Yes. The curiosity, the
Yeah,
mischievousness.
yeah.
So those elements of Ellie's character played into creating Fern as a character.
And she was such a fun little side character with her imagination, and it was just, I loved her so much.
Yeah, I
Um,
loved writing her too because it kind of helped bring out some of Beck's better qualities because,
mhm,
Beck is going through some things. And so you're meeting her at a really difficult juncture.
yeah,
And so Fern was kind of this opportunity to bring out some of the better qualities that Beck had.
yeah, yeah, that's awesome. Were there any other things that you were thinking, like, oh, this inspired this in this book, or?
So my character Bex that struggles with agoraphobia, and she functions really well at the farm. She's this independent person who she can do all sorts of things, but the minute that she has to leave the farm, anxiety starts to really take over for her. And when I was writing this, I was writing it after kind of pandemic times had kind of dissipated, and we were out and about again. And I started noticing in my own self, the longer that I was away from home, I would start to feel this feeling of anxiousness of like, I need to get back home. I need to get back home. I need to get back home. And so I had started questioning myself. I'm like, what is that? Why do I think that I need to get back home? A lot of it came from kind of internalizing that constant message of home is the only safe place.
Mhm.
And so I had started to kind of like take that in a little bit. And I was just like, wait a minute, what let me examine the truths and the lies that are in that statement and thinking through it. And I it as I was writing, I was like, I wonder if other people have struggled kind of with those some of those same feelings of being out and about again after being home, and just some of that anxiety from maybe not the same as mine, but as just, is it okay to be out doing these things? And when we're so used to like that home base feeling. And so a little bit of that element, though I didn't struggle on the level that Beck did, I related to someone who might struggle with agoraphobia on a different level than I would have previously. And so that kind of came into some of the character creation. And then with Callie and her unstable upbringing, a lot of her struggles with faith that you see on the page was inspired by some conversations that I had with a young woman. I was kind of a mentor in her life, and it wasn't a counseling relationship, but we had a lot of deep, good conversations because she was frustrated with her own faith. She was like, I feel like I should trust God more. I feel like I should be like, and there were so many, I should be here. But as we talked through a lot of her early caregiver experiences and how they weren't stable, and how we as human beings, a lot of times, whatever our early caregiver experiences are, we tend to kind of see God in that light to some degree or another. And we talked through like, well, it kind of makes sense that you feel like you can only depend on yourself. Because for a lot of your life, for those physical needs that were in front of you, you were responsible for yourself when there should have been someone that was caring for you. And so when I was writing Callie's character, a lot of those thoughts kind of were in my mind as I was writing. It's just some of those conversations that we had that were just really great conversations of breaking down where our faith comes from, the things that every one of us have hindrances to having a strong faith. They come from different places and different reasons, but we all have things that we might need to work through in order to see God as he truly is, as opposed to our version that we kind of create based on our best understanding of who God is.
That's such a good point because we only know our world, right? And God feels sometimes very removed from us. And so we learn from the humans we interact with and from, like you said, our early life. And so I loved that theme of trust in the book and learning how to trust. And if you were brought up in a situation where you couldn't trust, and I think every human on the earth has had trust broken by someone that they cared about. It's just part of the human experience. But then to take that and say, okay, can't if I can't trust people, can I trust God? That's the thing I think a lot of people go through and really question. So I loved that theme that you put in there. Um, Tell us a little bit about your writing process. Like, do you have a certain schedule you write in? And like, how long does it take you to write, say, the first draft? What does it take to go from the idea to it's in a published book form?
So I homeschool my kids. So I have to be pretty strict with myself on my writing schedule. I used to write at night, but when I first started writing, I wrote at night when everyone was asleep. But as years have gone by, I find myself so worn out. By the time the evening comes around, I try my best to make myself a morning person, which I am not at all. So I get up and I write from, 5:30 in the morning to about 8, 8:30, and then we start our day from there. And so if I do that every single day, I can get a book done by my deadline. So I try to stick with that, even if those writing days, a lot of words don't necessarily get on the page. But I tell people that the only person that I want to talk to at that time in the morning, no matter how long I've been making myself get up, is my fictional characters. One time for a group, I told them I was gonna like take a video of me in the morning so they could see, my writing routine. And then I tried to do it. And later I'm like, listen, let me just tell you about it because nobody needs to see me at that time in the morning. Like nobody needs to see that. Um, I'm not a very fast drafter. Some writers can get down that rough draft really fast. For me, it's the most painful part of the process. And it takes me a good 8 months to get that rough draft down. And then I try to take a couple of months to get it polished and be ready to go to my editor. Once it gets to my editor, it's about a year-long process between the different rounds of edits that story goes through. It'll go through developmental edits where they're looking at the big picture, where there are plot holes, and then it'll move on to line edits where they're looking like, okay, well, you said their eyes were brown in chapter 2, but now they're green. And chapter 34, word choice, like, I don't think that word means what you think it means. Sometimes we get in our head that we're like, oh, yeah, I know what that word means. Like, no, that's not the connotation that I wanted. So they go through line edits and finally proofreading and things like that. So from the very beginning of an idea to on the printed page that you all are holding, it's about a 2-year process for me anyway. It can vary. Like I said, some authors, they can write books and so fast and get them out so quickly. And I'm like, I admire your skill to do that. That is not my gift.
Yeah, yeah. And then, so after you've written that first draft, done your edits, and sent it off to your editor, are you then starting the next book, or are you just giving yourself a brain break, or?
So I've been kind of on a book per year kind of schedule. So for the book that just released, so Between the Sound and Sea came out August 6th. I had turned on in my book that comes out next year on August 1st. That book came out on August 6th, and now I'm working on the next book. So at one time, I'm usually drafting a book, editing a book, and marketing whatever the newest release is.
Kind of all at the
Um,
same time?
and so sometimes I'm like, wait, which characters am I talking about? What story world am I living in? I'm not really sure anymore.
Yeah, I start getting confused because I read so many books, and I finished your book, well over a month ago, and I'm on to this other one, and I'm like, wait a
It's
minute.
like it's like, oh no, we're not over here in Canada, we're in Tennessee.
Yeah,
And yeah.
yeah, and the book I'm reading right now also has a man named George in it, I
So
think.
then
And I was like, wait, which one is which? Yeah. Um, so Christine had a question that she put in the chat. What are some authors that influence you?
So I would say some authors that kind of influenced my writing journey or kind of, in a sense, paved a way for me a little bit with seeing books that were coming out by Erin Bartles and Susie Finkbeiner. Um, Katie Powner and we had books that kind of came out around the same time. But I love reading their stories because they always have these really deep characters and great character development. I don't know if you've read anything by Joanna Davidson Politano, but she was one of my very first critique partners, one of the very first people who looked at me and said, "Hey, you can write." And which meant a lot to me because she has really incredible books. I admire her a lot as an author. Um, the book that really launched me into I want to write words someday. So I said that I didn't grow up wanting to be an author, but I can remember in third grade, my teacher reading after lunch every day, Where the Red Fern Grows. And when she was reading that story, like I said, I read books, I read everything I could get my hands on, but that's like this distinct memory of reading words and feeling something. And I was like, wow, that is really amazing that someone wrote these words and I'm sitting here listening to it and I feel something based on these words that someone else wrote. I was like, I want to write something someday that people feel something from the words that I wrote. And so even as a little kid, that was kind of like ingrained in me a little bit.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. We actually, Erin Bartles, we read one of her books last month. So we had a really good time with her telling us about We Hope for Better Things. That was the one that we
Oh
had.
yeah, yeah, I like that one.
Krista asks, was there a particular reason you set the story in Tennessee?
I'm from Tennessee, so all of my books, my fourth book has a Tennessee girl who goes on a North Carolina adventure. But other than that, my books have been set in Tennessee. My first one was set in Middle Tennessee. I set my second in West Tennessee. And so I wanted to set the third in East Tennessee, which is where I'm from. So I live in Chattanooga, so I got to have a little bit of Chattanooga in there. I have a friend of mine has a farm that's in Sweetwater, which is where Beck's farm is. And so that's why, I've been born and raised in Tennessee and I love living here. So enjoy putting that on the page.
Yeah, that's awesome. Did you have any challenges as you were writing this book or any of your other books, and how did you overcome them?
I would say that He Should Have Told the Bees was one of no, it's not one of it's the hardest book that I've written. It was just, I think part of it was just some of it was the season that I was in as a writer. As a writer, we have our own internal things that we're trying to overcome as we write. And so there was that, and there were different elements of the story that I was wanting to balance. As far as there is an adult child of an alcoholic, and that's not my life experience. And so I did a lot of research trying to make sure that I honored what that experience would be like, so that if a reader picks up that book and that's their experience, that they would feel seen and heard, and trying to make sure that I measured that well in the story. I was trying to bring in the idea of bees into the story. And when you have something that is familiar to you, so it's one thing to bring in something into the story that is unfamiliar, but when it is familiar, you have to question yourself a lot. You're like, okay, so if I say a frame of bees, will that create a picture in someone's mind, or will that be like, I have no idea what you're talking about?
Right,
How
because
much
you know it
detail?
so well. Yeah.
So, how much detail do I put in to create a picture without it being just a handbook about bees? Because that's not why you picked up the book. You didn't
Yeah.
really want a handbook about bees. Um, and so that was a bit of a challenge. And so there were just a variety of things. I was kind of in between contracts while I was writing it, and I didn't really know what was next for me as a writer at that point. So there were just a lot of different factors from different areas that I was kind of working with as I was writing that story.
So, talk to us a little bit more about research because we've had a number of historical fiction authors come to our book group, and that comes with it a lot of research to getting it
Mm.
right. But this is contemporary, and you mentioned you did a lot of research around having being an adult child of an alcoholic parent, where how did you go about that research? Did you interview people or just like read every blog post on the internet? And were there other things in this story that you researched?
So, I did a lot of books. I read a lot of books. I interviewed a couple of people, and asking them about their experiences. My background's in counseling, so I have some like base knowledge for
Sure.
dealing with some of the trust issues and things like that. But then I was like, okay, but are there things that are specific to this experience, that I need to bring out? I'm making sure that my B facts were accurate, so that that could never happen, in the story. I didn't do a whole lot of research on location, but sometimes, for other books and other locations, making sure that if I'm doing a real location, that it's portrayed in a way that feels accurate. Um, so less research than historical, because you have to sometimes with historical, you have to go all the way down to word usage. Was this word even like
Yeah.
around or used?
Yeah. Cool. Let's see. One of the themes I noticed in here was about sacrificing your own dreams to help someone else, and where do you draw the line? And I'm curious, anybody on the call tonight, like what did you guys think about that? I know there was one quote in there that talked about you don't want to face God at the end of your life and say, like, you didn't do something that He put right in front of you. Someone was in need. And I know I feel a great weight of that in my life, that I never want to turn someone away if I have the ability to help them. But there is also a place for boundaries, and how do you balance that? And I don't know if you have thoughts on that, or anybody else who any of our readers have thoughts about that. I'd love to hear.
I found that question, that was going through the book really quite intriguing. It's like, because I don't know, we can ever really know the what accountability someone has for the choices they made, and like how it affects those around them, and when are they truly not being not doing what they should or could, and when are they really just desperately unable to. And so where does that responsibility begin and end to help someone? I found it really intriguing, and I thought you did a great job, Amanda, of like keeping that going the whole time. Like, I didn't know if Callie would sell the farm or not, and I'm I don't want to spoil it. Sorry. But I thought you did a great job.
Anybody else have thoughts on that?
I actually, it's curious that you brought that up because I was curious about that. If there was a part of you that struggled when you were trying to decide whether or not she should continue to support her mom, because um, ironically enough, I'm reading another book at the same time called Codependency. And in that book, it talks about, and I don't have any personal experience with a family member with addiction or anything. I like to learn. So in that book, it's really talking about how when you have a family member like that, we don't want to be codependent, enabling them, right? But then the theme of, because it's a Christian novel, it's like, well, what would be the best in God's eyes? So I was wondering if you struggled with that. I'm trying not to give away anything here. But if you struggled with which direction to go, Callie, not should, but which would be in everyone's best interest, not just one person's best interest. So I was curious about that. Thank you for bringing that up, Deb.
Yeah.
So I mean, I kind of had in mind the direction that I thought that I would go with the story, but as I was writing, I didn't want to make it an easy decision because the fact is, if you are facing being in a codependent relationship, particularly one in which a child has taken on the role of being a caregiver for a parent, and breaking free from like that pattern and where is that healthy, what does a healthy boundary even look like in that scenario? I wanted to portray that it isn't just an easy choice. There may be some people who read it and be like, well, she should just forget her mom. Like she's done enough. She's like, but that might be so. You might see it in that light, but is it easy to actually make that choice? Because it does become so entangled. And even you're down in one of the scenes there, it talks about how it almost has become entangled in her identity to who she is to protect and take care of her mom. And so to no longer do that feels like a denial of her own self. And so when I was writing that character and that struggle, I wanted to bring out all of the different pieces. And how she struggles, like, okay, how does my faith line up with this? At what point is it okay to step back and let consequences be what consequences may be? If I answer that
Yeah.
question or not, but
Another theme I really liked in this book started with the dust particles in the light, and how there's treasure in broken places, good things coming from challenging circumstances, beauty in just something as simple as dust. And I'm curious if anybody on the call had thoughts about that, or maybe something in your own life that when you first looked at it was something terrible, but then in the end, God was able to make something beautiful out of it in your life. No one has had anything tragic in their life. That's a shame. Everything's perfect.
I guess my husband and I, we used to have our own business, and it going under, I think, was definitely one of the best things that possibly could have happened to us, but it sure didn't feel like it at the time.
Mm,
But I mean, that's one for us personally. So yeah, I love reading about that with the dust and everything because it's just it's true.
yeah. Well, I will second that for you, Krista, because I also had a business that I had to close down, and it felt like, gosh, I put everything into this. How could I have failed, and how could it not have turned out well? But the skills that I learned do not go away. And so I've found in my new iterations of my life, I'm reusing those things, and the experiences I had are not wasted, even though it felt at the time like just utter failure. But I'm reusing the same skills and creating new beautiful things now. So I can relate to that as well. Anyone else? Christine.
I can relate. I mean, for the past 8, almost 9 years, I've been struggling with a just a personal illness. But part of the result of this illness is an amputation. And just learning how to live your life over again.
Yeah.
It certainly wasn't something that I planned or, you know, could have foreseen. It
Or
was
nobody wants to have an amputation either.
Yeah,
That's not on
yeah,
anybody's bucket list.
I was perfectly fine one day, literally perfectly fine one day, running, chasing children, and the next day I was in a coma. And once you get out of that, how did I like what is going on here? Um, I really fought and struggled to say, okay, God, what is your plan in this? Because this is pretty tragic. I mean, in my opinion, and now as the years have gone by, I mean, there's still days that it's terrible. I'm not saying that at all, but I do see God's plan. I see how he's worked like these small things out, and he's used them for his own good.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's just interesting that God can take things that I feel are huge, but in his plan they're just small.
Yeah.
They're just small hiccups, and he uses them anyway for his glory. So
Wouldn't it be easier if we could all see the big picture like he can?
mhm, absolutely.
And then our problems would seem small and we would go, oh, this is no big deal in the big picture. But
Hmm.
when you're in it, it's just not easy.
No, certainly not fun.
Yeah. Does anybody else have questions for Amanda that I didn't think to ask or you've been dying to know? Can unmute or raise your hand or write them in the chat.
I have one question. Do all of your books have um like a mate? Because they both started out single and they both ended up, oh, sorry. Do they have,
They both had a love interest throughout the book. It's fine.
yes, thank you. Is that like something that you strive for in your books? To have a love interest in the storyline?
It's not necessarily something that I am striving for in the story. It does, if I think back, that it does play a feature in most of the books, but a lot of times it's more of a subplot. It's not the main plot. I always kind of want to have that perspective that relationships don't solve our problems, but they can be something that does enrich our life in really wonderful ways. So those I would say my fourth book is the one that has more of a romance thread than the other ones. Whereas the other ones, there are people in their life who start out as friends and they become, their relationship shifts through the story. But it's not necessarily the point of the story. Whereas a romance novel, it's kind of like that driving force of the story.
I love that. I don't mind a romance book, but sometimes I get a little worn out. And so it's nice to have something like this where there's a real character driven and what are the characters going through and yes, they have a relationship too, but it doesn't have to be all about the relationship all the time. So I liked that. Can you give us a little teaser about some of your other books, maybe the new one that just came out or other ones we would like to read?
So the newest one is called Between the Sound and Sea. It's about a young woman whose life kind of gets messed up by some small town scandal that her family's name kind of gets drug into a kind of through no fault of their own, but it's really messing up her life. It's even caused her parents to move away on a much quicker schedule than they had originally planned. And she's kind of in this town trying to hold together her life, which isn't working very well. And her friend gives her this idea to go and take this temporary position as a project manager on an abandoned lighthouse that a private individual has bought, and they want to restore this lighthouse. And so she decides to go for it. She's like, what do I have to lose? I can go away for about 4 months, kind of reevaluate my life and see if I really want to try to stick it out in this town that really doesn't care too much for me. And so she arrives and she meets and sort of falls in instant adoration with this elderly gentleman named Walt, who has bought this lighthouse. And as she gets to know him, she realizes that the last lightkeeper's daughter was a childhood friend. And they parted on not so great terms. And so he has a lot of regrets about how that relationship ended. And so he's wanting to restore this lighthouse as a way to honor her. But as she's working on it, certain things start going wrong on the island. It seems like somebody doesn't want the work being done. She finds in the walls of this lighthouse letters from the 1940s that they are about written from the perspective of a female lightkeeper. And she's like, oh, that's fascinating. She goes to research it, and there's nobody by that name, like in the history books. And so she doesn't really know who these letters are from. So to try to help Walt, who she realizes restoring this lighthouse isn't actually going to restore his heart, That's kind of his perspective. So she really wants to try to help him have the closure that he doesn't have and try to figure out what really happened to his friend. And so it's this story that's set on this remote North Carolina island that has a little bit of history of World War II that I didn't know about, and that takes place in the Outer Banks of North Carolina. It's got a little bit of mystery, what really happened to the last lightkeeper of the lighthouse. And it's got a little thread of romance in it as well.
Fun. That sounds really, really good.
It was a really fun story to write. So hardest book I've ever written would be Bees. The most fun I've ever had writing a story was the one that came after it.
Okay, well, we're gonna have to put that on our TBR list. Christine says I'm in. All right, good. That sounds like a good one. Well, Amanda, we appreciate so much you being here tonight and sharing all about the bees. You are the queen bee, clearly, with your writing and with your beekeeping. And we just appreciate you spending your evening with us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a great conversation, and I love spending time and talking with readers.
Great.